Welcome to Under the Sisterhood, where we honor female experiences. During each episode, I will have intimate conversations with women of all ages to get under the hood of their individual journeys through womanhood. Together, we'll pursue the many aspects of the female experience, creating a sacred space for women to share their stories, their ideas, and their wisdom. This is a podcast to celebrate women and recognize all that they do in our world. I'm Elizabeth Elfenbein. Let's get under the hood. Today, I'd like to welcome and honor Essie Jain. Essie is a mother, daughter, sister, friend, and English singer-songwriter who has been writing and recording music for over 2 decades. Her songs have traveled far and wide out into the world and touched many hearts, including mine. She has drawn critical acclaim for her work as a singer, writer, performer, and recording artist. I couldn't be more honored to be getting under the hood with you today. Welcome, Essie.
Oh, thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
This has been such a wonderful journey. Women are amazing. I mean, and everybody, it's so interesting. While these questions are so universal, everybody's point of view and their answers are so uniquely them. And so it's just been really a spiritual experience. So why don't we get going if it's okay?
Sure, yeah.
Wonderful. So what does being a woman mean to you, Essie?
I think at this point in time, because I think what a woman means to you means so many different things in the different chapters of your lifetime. So if I can only speak to this moment, it would be motherhood. And that I think for me would be sort of divided into two, because the first is the very literal interpretation of that, which is mothering my actual daughter. And the second interpretation of it would be my work in music as a mothering figure, as in, you know, the big hug, the comfort, the love. I've always received a lot of feedback in my work that it is very, very, very mothering. And in a way that I think was long before I was an actual mother. So I think being a mother has informed my music work even more. It's made me, reach for different things in my work, perhaps even a greater vulnerability as I've gotten older, and I've been able to just make the work I want to make. That feeling gets stronger and stronger and stronger, the ability to be vulnerable and be seen, be heard. So yeah, it's an interesting time because they are kind of running parallel to each other. And then when I kind of separate from my mothering with my daughter, I shift gears and mother in my work. And then sometimes they kind of merge together. And then other days they feel very, very separate. Like I have to be alone to do this work. And other times I can have a kind of pottering around me as ideas work their way through my head. So yeah, it's a really interesting time in that way to experience that sort of duality of the big hug, I call it, the big embrace.
I think that's a really interesting answer, and I think the fact that you're really focusing on where you are today with being a woman versus,
Yeah.
as you said, there's many chapters, you go through many phases of womanhood, if you will, and
Oh, yeah.
so relating to that one's really, really interesting to me. And I like the fact, I think that you hit on something that I think a lot of women who, particularly who, working women with children, you
Mhm.
are constantly weaving in your mothering, your womanhood, your mothering, your embrace. I love that embrace, like your family. Your music becomes your family is your family, and it's really interesting. Do you want to elaborate at all on that? And sort of what I'm saying is the notion of, and I hate this word, but the fact that women are kind of multitaskers. It's not that you're doing it at the same time, but in a way you kind of are, because you're living it and experiencing it and breathing it. So is there anything about that that really speaks to you?
I do. I resonate with that word multitask. It does seem that way on occasion. It seems very, and yes, you're right. We're never doing anything exactly at the same time, but some days it really feels like you are doing like 1,000 things at once. And I think the trick is this sort of, I'm going to use it, it doesn't seem like a very good way to describe it either, but divide and conquer. I always thought about it like that. Like, how can you kind of compartmentalize this to then do this, and then move this off to the left so you can do this thing to the right, and then you can move ahead. And it's just this big moving organism, which is, it's multitasking and you're juggling. And I think I've learned, she's nearly 3 now, I've learned how to take better care of myself over those 3 years. Initially, I didn't. I think you just get swept, and maybe how can you in that first year is so enveloping. And I just kind of went with that and kind of pitter-pattered around the fringes of my music work. But then you know, it's like a sort of fog that clears, and then you can find yourself again and find the next chapter of what your work in the world is. For me, obviously, that's as a musician, and learning the art of that multitask, because you do have to keep creating. I was never somebody that could get completely swamped in my mothering. I want to show her what's possible for women. My grandmother did the same thing, and it was pretty inspiring and led me to do what I wanted to do. So I feel like doing the same for her. It can feel hard sometimes, but ultimately, if she sees me doing what I love and what I'm passionate about, my hope is that translates to what's possible for her, you know?
I love it. I think that's just brilliant. And you know what really resonates is I think a better word for multitasker is artist. And not just
Oh,
artist as
yeah.
a musician, but we're artists. Women are
Yeah.
artists. We have to do all these different things, and we do it so quietly and effortlessly. No one knows that inside we're swirling. We're just trying to keep it all going. So there's a
Mhm.
real art to it. So let's take away multitasking. We're artists. Well, you're
All
already an
right,
art.
I'm
We're
with you.
both already artists, but you're a real artist. I'm just a commercial one. Anyway, so moving on, I think this is a really interesting question. What has your female experience been like through your lifetime? And then at what age would you say that you realized or felt like a woman?
Well, my female experience has been pretty strong. My grandmother was a doctor, and my mother worked for the BBC for many years, and then she became enveloped in the alternative healing arts. So she became a reflexologist. And then my aunt, those are the sort of 3 central women that were very impactful for me, and I would say around me the most. She's a herbalist, a naturopath, and they were all just so, they all felt incredibly strong and committed to what they wanted to do with their lives. Whether or not they achieved everything on their list, or still have, it was kind of neither here nor there. They just had this energy of doing, and a lot of strength. So the female, how would you say it, the female aura around me, surrounding me with all these women, was very, very, very strong. And I never felt that things were impossible for me. My family was hugely supportive of a life in the arts. Nobody wanted me to travel a direction that I wasn't passionate about. And I really feel like they moved mountains to help me navigate that, in a myriad of ways, actually. Just so supportive. And they're musicians themselves, all of them. So, and the men in my family too. So it became just really easy to decipher who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. And of course, they introduced me to being a musician at a young age. So that was always felt very possible. There was no disempowerment. My mum was completely, I don't know what you could call her, non-traditional in her sense of the generation. She didn't cook, she didn't clean, she didn't do any of the regular things. She went out to work, she barreled home late at night, from my recollections, and she was great. And she would tell you she had regrets about not being there more. But essentially, I think that was really powerful to me to watch her at work, and see her. So, and then the first moment of realizing I'm a woman, I mean, I think it was pretty classic. It was when I got my period. That was a big moment, and lovely and open and discussed in my family, not shamed or strange. So I remember that, particularly my aunt being very keen to celebrate that as a moment, like a moment of transition. So it's a very kind of physical answer, but I remember feeling that distinctly, that that period was something that it was a big transformational moment, and it was very honored. And I really appreciate them for treating it that way and not hiding anything. Or I've met plenty of friends in my life whose mothers and families kind of hid it away and, you know, tucked you in the bathroom and pushed you aside. So I'm happy that didn't happen to me. So,
You know, it's interesting hearing that. Wow, I think getting your period, it's such a poignant time. I mean, so
mhm.
much, and you feel so much. But I think what I'm hearing from you, and I wish I could say I had the same. My mom did not. My mom celebrated everything about me, but being surrounded by that female, that empowering or powerful female aura, and having an aunt who would explain and really let you understand that it was the beginning of womanhood, that really taking the time to explain it. I didn't necessarily have that. I was honored and sacred, but that wasn't the moment for me. And I think you're very lucky because just having that experience, being surrounded by those women and knowing that that's a real inflection point in your life allowed you to
Yeah,
feel something differently. And to your point, be honored and honor it, and not
yeah.
be and not feel shame. And shame was an interesting comment from some other people. So I think that's so beautiful. You're so lucky. Um,
Yeah, it's always felt good, that's a yeah, yeah.
it makes sense. Just the short time I've known you, that just totally makes sense in just seeing who you are and stuff. That just, yeah, that's wonderful. Wow. I think about my daughters. Whoa. Uh,
Mhm.
so so
I
Opal will
think
be
about
very
that too
lucky.
with my own
Yes.
daughter,
Yes.
making sure that moment, because you can always kind of do one better than your parents, right? You can try there. So I think about those things with my daughter, like what will I do at that moment in her life? I will give that same grace that I was given, and then how do I make that even more expansive, you know, and make her feel safe, and hope we are deeply still connected at that point. And you know, there's a lot of intention there for her to have that the same way. Yeah.
And she will have it because
Mhm.
that's what you're creating. That's the environment that you're raising her in. So she will
Yeah.
absolutely, and she'll love it and value it. So I think this is a fun question. What would you, so you're looking at yourself, you're in a mirror and you're looking at your 18-year-old self. What would you tell your 18-year-old self if you could talk to her again?
Well, first, that is the most tender age for me. I mean, in my life, that oof, it's such a tender age. I think I would make sure to tell myself that you can redefine yourself every single second. I know the decades feel like, oh, you know, I was maybe this in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s. I really like that the decades are there, because actually I think they do define many things about you. The 18-year-old seems to me on that threshold, it feels like you're turning this corner into adulthood. It's certainly defined that way, isn't it, by society? But it does feel quite a lot like that as well, because you know, more often than not, you're leaving your family home. So there's a lot of things that come together to make 18 particularly tender, I think. Um, yeah, I think it's the redefining thing, never to feel locked at any moment in your life, that you can literally the next day become something new, make a new decision, create a different thing. You really can turn things around and move different directions if you want to. I would love it if that was more, you know, articulated, that you know, sometimes with the whole university push and where are you going and what are you studying and what are you going to focus on, I think if that could be a little wider, I know I would have enjoyed a slightly wider window there at that moment. Those years were my most difficult and temperamental and troublesome and painful. So I think as a younger woman, knowing that there is this sort of endless possibility and that you have the power to shift that would be, you know, not feeling like you're stuck anywhere, because my gosh, you know, there's so many years ahead. There's so many years ahead, you know.
That's so inspiring. That is so inspiring. If I could have heard that, well, at 18, I think I was like not putting myself in a box. I was actually freeing myself from a box. So,
Yeah,
but I think you're right though, because it's about a mindset. It's
it
about
is.
knowing that at any time you're never stuck. You can do anything you want to do and believing it. And it was interesting. I had another conversation with a flamingo guitarist, fantastic woman, Alyssa Hockman. She's performed at a couple of events for me many years ago, and she was telling me that she teaches a lot now, and she focuses two things with her students, which is, you know, confidence and conviction. So imagine we're back telling our 18-year-old self, you can change, you can do whatever you want, you can redefine yourself, you can write many books, your life can be many books, not just one. I mean, it's just, but you need confidence and you need to go along with conviction. So I think that's just beautiful. So this is, I think, a really topical issue, this question, which is, how do you feel about being a woman in today's world?
Oh, well, of course, we find ourselves on the edge of the Supreme Court decision in the United States here. I grew up in England. I grew up in a nation where we don't have any, what do we call this, religious interference in our society in that way. There is a lot of separation, and it is an absolute given. So I grew up in that environment. I moved to America when I was 22, 23, and it was a given here, but now that has left. You just, in this very moment, I guess, kind of harking back to the first question, you know, at this, you know, because this will change again in 10 years, this answer will be completely different. It will change in a year, I'm sure. I think as a woman, you feel, well, first of all, you feel the immense power of womanhood, even in a moment where somebody's like trying to squish it. You feel that, you still feel that great power, that all is possible. And I think after the initial grief, women are remarkable at this kind of quick mobilization, this gathering together, this hunting for resources, this reach to help each other. I think it moves quite quickly, and I witnessed that, and that was amazing. Everything from donating to gathering the resources and the links to direct women here, direct women there. It was really powerful to watch. So at the same time as it was difficult, it was also incredibly inspiring. And I think I'm just reminded that, of course, we're going to prevail through this because we are women, for goodness sake, you know? It's, I'm not sure, I don't know what they were thinking,
I
but
love that.
yeah, you cannot hold back great oceans and seas, and you know, those thousand drops making that ocean. There's not a greater analogy for the power of women when we are a collective together. So it felt really sticky and complicated and confusing, as I said, having been in the UK, and you know, and then suddenly, you know, just swooped away, and then I feel the ocean swells again, the raindrops come together, and we move in the direction of, you know, freedom of our reproductive rights and for all people. And we're moving into an era of gender fluidity, and definitions are kind of dissolving themselves as well. So there's just so much movement and wonderful things here. This next generation is super cool to watch. I love watching them kind of break barriers and destroy definitions and open up conversations. So I think there's a lot to look through behind us of what's coming in. There's some amazing people coming through here, who are all about self advocacy and self care and just basic fundamental rights of life, you know. So
Actually, you
freedom to
just,
be,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that's, yeah.
Actually, that's just beautiful. I love it. There's nothing, everything you said there, it's just like, I can feel it on my body. It's a visceral experience. I think that's the, that's what being a woman in today's world is. It is the oceans, it's everything coming together. And I think, there's nothing more important than uniting in sisterhood and doing everything we can to help lift each other.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, and I think that's a huge thing. And I think women are going in that direction. They probably could go a little more. Do you have any thoughts around that?
How to move, meaning,
Do you agree with that? That like, I mean, I think you made a great comment around the fact that when we're a collective, there's so much power there. And so,
yes.
and it's like,
I
how
think,
do,
I think being very, very conscious about striking each other down in any way. I can find also, you know, sometimes women can be heavily critical of themselves and each other. And even if that's internal, it's kind of quietly critical of yourself or quietly critical of another woman. I think all those things need to be brought back into check. This the ocean won't move in the right ways unless we start kind of dismantling our critiques of ourselves and each other. And that just, I think the trick to that is probably more self-care for ourselves, because I think when you start to really give yourself care and prioritize your own wellness, your mental health, your physical health, your spirit health, that does translate into a kinder, more inclusive hold and atmosphere. And it just, I think natural kindness and natural compassion come from, you know, really, really caring for yourself and caring for your fellow human,
I think that's
planet,
beautiful. I'm,
animal.
re- I'm really glad that I actually poked you on that one, because you just said some really meaningful stuff. And that folds really nicely into the next question is like, what would you change if you could change anything to make life better for women? So I think you've hit on some of it, but now this answer is more targeted. Like, where
Yeah.
would you go with that one?
Well, in a continuation of exploring the idea of this kind of radical self-care where you could prioritize yourself on a daily basis. I had a teacher many, many years ago who said if someone could remember to inhale and exhale every day, that would be the most powerful thing in the world. And I just never forgot that. And if there's 2 days that go by where I'm like, oops, I didn't remember that I breathed. I've never forgotten it, and I've repeated it, and I talked about it in another podcast many years ago, just because I think it's so important. It's that power of the breath to center yourself, to center your bodily functions. Getting therapeutic care from other women, I think the body is this very powerful vessel, and it holds huge amounts of the past, and I think it does get embedded in us in some way. So I think the breath combined with any kind of therapeutic body work, from acupuncture to massage, cranial sacral therapy, listening to music, creating, drawing, painting, taking those moments of self-care are essential to do any work in the world. Because you can't show up to advocacy like a kind of frazzled mess. You can't show up to mother your children frazzled, or your partner. It's impossible. I think women can sometimes, and in fact maybe we're tipping back to should not be multitasking to such a degree, right? We should be artists more. We should be back to that word, as you so eloquently put it at the beginning. We should be arting every day, and then we're so much better. We're so much better together. We're so much better for ourselves. So that's what I would shift, is taking the time for self-care for women, no doubt. With
I
anything that floats your boat, I wouldn't want to define that either. Goodness me, that can be anything. Some people love sitting in the soil and planting their tomatoes. It doesn't have to be anything crazy or phenomenal. It can be beautiful and simple and loving, and yeah, anything.
I couldn't agree more. That is just beautiful. A lot of discussions around the internal and the external, and discussions around, so you're talking about self-care. And I've been thinking about, well, what's our mission at the end of the day, if under the sisterhood is to come alive and really help people, is if we can help build efficacy, so
Yeah.
self-efficacy through self-care, and then
Yes.
self-advocacy, so women take care of their internal, and then they can go out into the world and advocate for themselves and for other women.
Oh
I
yeah.
think, and you hit on that. So it's like, it's just putting it in a different phrase. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think you're right. Every single modality, whatever it is that floats your boat, get out
Mhm.
into nature, go for the walks, get your blood flowing, let the sun hit your face. And apparently even without sunglasses on, to get the exposure of the sun, because it affects certain things about your psychology of your, so all of that, I couldn't agree more. And believe it or not, I went from being 5 years ago to a multitasker I had so much energy, but in a gerbil mill kind of way. I was just moving so fast. And then, guess about 4 years ago, I decided to jump off a mountain. I left my career. I left my husband. I like just left things. I jumped off a mountain, no parachute. And then I started self-care, meditating twice a day. I do
Mhm.
breathing exercises, all of that stuff, journaling, all these things for self-care, because if you take care of yourself, you can take better care of others. And I think,
Mhm.
so your answer couldn't be, it's just so beautiful. And I'm sure women will be very inspired by that. So back to the whole sisterhood thing. Do you feel part of a sisterhood?
It's multi-generational here, and all different kinds of people from all different walks of life. Most of us are creative, which is pretty cool. And we have a nurse practitioner in there as well, who is also doing her creative work. She's somebody who, she's just one example of, someone living their life here and coming together with the rest of us. We have a sommelier, we have a lady who describes herself as "I make things." We have some
Maker.
really great people. There's other kids, there's other families, and the women here are it's just great, because we're raising our children together, and they play together every day, and our lives are intertwined, and we're all joined together in this complex, and we support each other. And if you need a lemon, you need a lemon. And does anybody have sugar? It's a little bit like living in an old style village, which a lot of us know, especially me. Most of us aren't, well, I feel like a lot of people I don't know are not necessarily near their families anymore. They've left their hometowns. I mean, I'm miles away. I grew up in London. My mum's still there. My family's still in England, and moved to New York for 17 years and then into LA. And you do realize that absence over those years. So you have to create these new families with your friends. And this particular way of living, we're kind of close knit. Everybody has their own houses and apartments here. And we are a really, I think, a really lovely example of what happens when you throw a group of people together and you help each other. And that's very strong with all the women here. I mean, if somebody has a urinary tract infection, you know about it. Somebody can bring you something. If you're a mum and you're struggling and you're having a horrible 2 weeks, there's another mum who's either in the same boat or just been there. There's somebody to swoop your children away if you're struggling with things. There's generational, all different kinds of women here. So your children are looking at this lovely art of all these different kinds of ladies and realizing that there's multi types of women. And it's I definitely, it's really strong here in that way. And then of course my friends scattered around as well. We really got lucky. When we moved to LA, we left a lot of that in New York, of course, because when you're there 17 years, you do create those sisterhoods. And gosh, there are some women I miss in New York, and we'll all see each other as best we can. So I'm pretty blessed to land in this spot and be surrounded by that love, that sisterhood here. It's really special. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I have to say, that it takes a sister to know a sister. And I don't mean, and the reason why I'm saying that is that if you're not open as a woman to the sisterhood, you don't find the sisterhood. So I think, but I also think that when you have young children, you do you're around all these women and you're raising your children together. So I think you're very, very fortunate, but I think you're also very, very open. So it's natural that that women would want you in their sisterhood, or that you'd be the leader of the sisterhood just by your personality, because you are so open and embracing of that. And I think that, I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that, like imagining, because it's a mindset, right? It's like not
Yeah.
all women, it's like that you recognize the importance of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's one big system, isn't it? That, how would you describe it? It's like it feels like when you come together with other women like that, that there's a sort of ball of energy, I guess, if I'm trying to think of a visual for it, which you're all, or maybe even kind of a big pot where you're all adding things to this pot together that influence each other and help each other. It feels like that here, with my friendships. And you're right. I think that openness to that is really important, because the more vulnerable you are, the more open you are, the deeper you can go with people. And I think if you're also open and vulnerable, it often encourages other people to meet you in the same place. Um, and I know I've met women like that in my life when I wasn't feeling as open or vulnerable. And then they were able to just light that little fire that enabled me to, be free of some shame or speak something out loud that no one had heard before. And sometimes you can only do that with the sisterhood you meet later in your life. Sometimes with your family, you can't speak those deep, dark places. And with the sisterhood you're creating, with the safe, if you make it a safe space, it can be remarkably healing, I think, and allow you to be witnessed, and witness others in you know that idea. You're kind of moving through life and you have a certain amount of bags on your back. I feel like all the women I've met, they've always helped me take off one of the bags, in whatever way, and I would hope I did the same for them. So I think that's that openness, and I think that's a beautiful way you put it. Like, if you allow yourself to be open, well, then worlds create around you, and I can draw these loving people to me, and be of service, if for a use of a better word, in each other's lives.
I love that. Wow. So incredibly touched by this discussion. I mean, that's really meaningful to me, because sometimes I'm not always as open. When I'm open, I'm wonderfully open. And I think just hearing that, because what a beautiful thing for you to across the country. So you didn't just move from London to you did your London to New York as a kid, but when you're moving your family across country, and just setting up new and being able to build that sisterhood, that's beautiful. You're so fortunate. But as I said, it makes sense. It's just who you are. And isn't it the law of attraction, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
I don't think I
powerful.
felt that as strongly, that law of attraction moving across the nation. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is my moment. Everything is going to be new. So I'm really going to have to decide what I'm focusing my attention on, and what on earth do I want to create here. I'm not actually a particularly big journaler, but I remember on the move from here to there, in New York, the walls were covered in writings, you know, before we left because we were moving out, and pieces of paper were stuck everywhere, and there was drawings of just things we wanted to create, and it looks a lot like that actually. There's a couple of things missing. I think Patrick put up this picture of this amazing guitar, which I guess will come at some point. We've yet to find this oh kind of thing, you know. But for the most part, God, it looks pretty like those pictures. I just remembered that, and these sort of statements, you know, and ideas. It was, oh yeah, definitely strong vision there, no doubt. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
Wow. Wow. What a
It was a
cool
lot of fun.
experience. Yeah. Wow. And not even, well, I guess you did it so that you would realize it, but I'd be the type of person who would do it and not expecting this. And then 3 years later, it would be happening. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I had that on the wall, type of thing.
Just
But you guys,
realized that myself.
but you did it intentionally, is what I'm getting at. That's
Yeah,
wonderful. That is just so wonderful. So,
yeah,
so we're finishing up our interview. This is a big, big question. So
yeah.
this is your platform. Man, you have so many platforms. So this is just another platform for you. But I think what's important is this is your opportunity to speak to women around the world of all ages, generations, backgrounds, you know, cultures. And what would the message you'd want to leave them with from Essie Jain? What would your hey, woman, hear me roar? What would Essie's message be to the world? And it isn't one word, it's whatever it needs to be for you. So please.
Oh, definitely listening to yourself. I can think of 100 times when I didn't. That intuition in us is remarkably accurate, and we always know when we stray from it. You can feel it in your body. I know your body. What was that wonderful thing? The body never lies, and I love that. You can really understand through your body what is going on with your intuition. They're very bound together, I think. So you have this such a clear guidance information system. So just listening to yourself and tuning into that and making decisions from that place, making big decisions with, you know, as much quiet thought as being with as much radical thought, you know, honoring both those sides of yourself, the parts of you and those times in life where you're listening to yourself and you've got to take a massive leap out. You've got to like huge changes. And then other moments in life where the listening to yourself perhaps means it's a quieter change, you know, there's more internal work going on. And then dancing between the two, I think, throughout your lifetime. And I think it becomes more obvious, I think, once you commit to listening to yourself, that becomes your lifelong practice of how do I return to listening to myself every day. And there are certainly moments when I know it drifts, when you aren't listening to yourself, and also being super kind in those moments too, being respectful that it's not today, and that, you know, it's some days are definitely harder than others. And some chapters in life are harder than others. But that is a mantra I think would be what I would want to relay here for this moment. It would be, and I'm saying it to myself too, to listen to myself. It's really important to remind myself on that matter as well, because like I say, there's some drifty times where it doesn't happen, and it's good to connect back in. And, you know, probably a good thing to have written down somewhere. I think I've enjoyed that. If something comes to you like a phrase, mine would be listen to yourself, but perhaps your phrase is something completely different. I think the power of writing that down and maybe just putting it up on your bookshelf or the place where you work, just a little reminder of, you know, that kindness to yourself is a really important thing to do as well. Can give you a little nudge on a funny day, you know.
I think that's, yeah, wow, that's really powerful. It's such a simple thought, and it's interesting. Here we are trying to see, hear, and honor women But now we are asking the public, people, women, see, hear, honor us.
Yeah.
But now we're asking ourselves to listen to us, trust. And the intuition, I think, is huge. I mean, I've always been a very intuitive, like I can feel it when it feels right. It's great. I can feel it when it's wrong. And there's just something, it's a visceral thing, to your point. And so I think that's a great message to put out there, because it's asking you there's a duality in being heard, being seen, and but then you listening. And so the other thing, just to build on that, is listening to others as well. And I think that's an area I've been working. While I always felt I listened, sometimes I like to share a lot because I get excited about the ideas. So, but I think it's really powerful. And I think you're listening. What you're talking about is listening to your intuition, what you feel, lean into the feeling. So that's just
Yeah, and that
wonderful.
helps you listen to others. I mean, that's amazing what you say. I love that, like that, because it keeps traveling, doesn't it? It translates to listening to others, and that's, I mean, that's it. That's to live on this earth. You have to be doing both those things. You have to listen to yourself, and you have to listen to others to work through life with people. Every relationship you have is all about this big listening. Listening to your calling in life, and listening if you've hurt somebody else, listening to them, helping to you know what is your part in every relationship. It's big, it's part of a very wide discussion, but I'm totally with the listening to others. That just gets nice and expansiony, and off we go.
Yeah, no, I don't want this conversation to end. It's really deep, and you have actually taught me so much, like listening and hearing, not just your answers, your thoughts, your concepts around this, the whole thing about our female experience and womanhood, and, what, like the power that we have and all the things that we do. And sometimes we're not even aware of it. We just are who we are because we
Yeah.
are, women, we're so busy doing that we're not recognizing the power. But this has been an absolutely wonderful, sacred conversation. I'm just so honored and grateful that you have spent this time with us, Essie. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so glad for the invite. It's always good to talk. It's so important to share. And this is another way to do such things, to share with each other. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. We hope you will join us next episode to honor amazing women from around the world. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood, LLC, and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Zach Slav, and edited by Zach Slav. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.